Welcome, Cynthia, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Hello. How are you?
Now, listen, I'd love to start by asking a little bit about your history with Wicked. What are your kind of memories of the show, debuting on stage, and what did you know about it, I suppose, before this project came to you?
The first time I had come across the project was when I was at drama school, I think 19, 20 years old. And a friend of mine would go to the library, grab a couple of librettos, and we would steal away to room with a piano in it. Whenever I wasn't feeling great or we had some time and we just wanted to feel a little normal, we would pick these books, and one of them was Wicked. And we always would go to that libretto. We would always go to that libretto, and we would sing it front to back. So I learned all the music by the time I was 23, and I hadn't seen the show yet. So I knew the music very well. And by the time I was 25, I took myself on a solo birthday date to see the show on the West End. And that was the first time I'd seen it, and I fell in love with it almost immediately. Couldn't get the songs out of my head, obviously, because I knew them, and now I could put them in situ, and I could see what it all meant and why people were singing things. And I loved this tale of this person who felt really out of place and had to figure out how to hone her power using the emotions that she had. And that's kind of my beginnings with Wicked. From being someone who really didn't feel like she fit in, learning that music, to being someone that could finally afford a ticket to the West End and getting herself a solo ticket to go and sit in an audience and watch. And I was in heaven. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. I mean, that is such a key theme of the musical, and I think this movie really picks on it. That feeling of being an outsider,
Mm.
of feeling lost, of feeling not part of a community.
Yeah.
I wonder how much was present in the script when it arrived to you. Well, I mean, maybe the script wasn't the first thing that came to you. I mean, tell me about that.
The first thing that came to me was I had a conversation with Jon Chu first, and it was very sort of casual. We weren't necessarily talking about me doing it or me auditioning for it. We were just talking about the project. Um, and then we had like a proper conversation. Then we had a real conversation about me maybe coming in to read an audition for it. And then I finally went in to audition for it. That's sort of how that happened. Um, but yes, the theme is there, and I don't know. It was always a part of the script. I think it's always been a part of the book as well. So it's now that undercurrent of what it feels like to be alone or different or not a part of the community and not accepted was always there. Um, and it was always in this piece. And I think it's the volume is turned up simply because I think I understand what that actually feels like. And so I can put my own experience and my own memories in Elphaba's hands and tell her to go with them.
Were there particular songs in those, even in those early days when you were messing around with the librettos? Were there like particular songs that you kind of gravitated towards?
I loved The Wizard and I. I loved The Wizard and I, and I loved I'm Not That Girl. And they're sort of polar opposites in a way, because The Wizard and I is really hopeful. It's a moment where she can dream and she can allow herself to believe that anything she wants is possible. And then I'm Not That Girl tells you that sh that stuff doesn't come to her. The big dreams doesn't come to her. The the love doesn't come to her because she isn't the archetype that anyone would go for. I think deeper in that song is that why would why would those things come to me? Because I'm not like her. I'm not like anyone really. And that feeling of really being singular and alone. Uh, Both of those songs are sort of like they live on the A side and B side. I think they sort of work really well together.
Absolutely, they do. I'm curious when you start approaching the role from the perspective of doing it in film.
Mhm.
does knowing it so well at that point, help, or do you feel an additional sense of the responsibility of the many actresses that have played this role on stage, the many fans all around the world? I mean,
Yeah.
what goes through your mind as you're just trying to take your first steps into figuring out how to play her in film?
Yeah, you can't really avoid the feeling of responsibility of playing a role like this, not just because of the actresses who have played this particular role on Broadway and the West End alike, but because of what's come before it. Uh, when we're talking about The Wizard of Oz, if we're talking about The Wiz, like we're talking about this iconic uh, character in film history uh, that has its own sort of folklore around it that you simply cannot ignore. So I have that responsibility in my head that I want to not not just give something new because of the sake of giving for the sake of giving something new, but to have another viewpoint on it because I want it to be as truthful as it possibly can from my point of view. And that isn't that I want to change everything because we should change everything because it's me doing it, but I really want everyone to have the truth from me. I don't want to sully someone else's work by providing a mimic of what they've done or a copy of what someone else has done because they have done the work to provide those versions. I want to see what they've done and learn, but then create my version, create what felt right for me. So those songs, when they come out of my mouth, they feel like it's me, and I'm giving you the emotion from my experience and the life that I've lived, because I can only speak to that. So that's the only way you can approach it. If you approach it from what's the truth of the matter first, and then we can go from there. Then whatever comes out of my mouth when I sing, comes from there. And it's not just, well, I can sing this song and I'm going to sing it like this. I could sing it however I wanted to sing it. I can give you a million and one riffs, but that doesn't serve anything. It doesn't do anything to move the story. But if I give you that one riff on Limb, because I know that it will tell you about the pain of it, ugh, I can't do that. I'm not that, you know, then it services the piece. And so I'm trying to make sure that whatever decision I make actually services the character and the piece at large. Yeah.
And does that, I mean, I think that's the sense that I get from everybody that I've heard speak about this movie, having worked on it. I
Yeah.
remember, this is a name drop, but you got to work with her, so not as much of a name drop. Having lunch with Michelle Yeoh while she was
Yeah.
making the movie, and just hearing her talk about the passion that she had for it and the excitement she was having with you all on set, it
Yeah.
feels like a real community developed. And this was a long shoot.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
shot
Yeah.
both of these films back to back.
Yeah, it was. And everyone approached it in that way. I always like to think from John Chu to Jack, who it was our first AD, to Bobby, who was blowing the wind to make sure that the cape blew in the right way, to Alice Brooks, who's our DOP, to Sim Camps, who's doing my hair, to, Alice Jones, who's doing my makeup, Carmen Paulson, who's dressing me. Everyone is working to go in one direction. We want to tell the truth of this story. We want to make sure that every detail is provided uh, in the clearest possible way. And so all of our cast members, all of our crew members, everybody working on it knew that there was a job to do and we wanted to do it well. Yeah. So we were all moving in the same direction on the same vehicle, going in the right way, and trying to make sure that everyone's care was shown. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the head of the ship, of course, John Chu, who I feel has, been instrumental in bringing the big screen musical back to life. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, the Benj Pasek as well,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
there are a number of people in that small group that are
Yeah.
finally like giving us big screen musicals again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about his passion for
I
this.
mean, but he loves musicals full stop. He's a nerd through and through, just like me. He loves it to the bone. And so, and it's so interesting because he's got this wonderful love of music and real understanding of music. And so what I loved about working with him is he would always want to make a little room for the present. So so that you could, if there was a breath that he needed to catch, he wants to catch the breath. If he would always say, actually, we should have the piano on set, so that if they want to take a pause here, they can pause. If we want to take a breath here, if we want to breathe a little bit more, then we can take it really, really slowly at the very beginning before we launch into the song, so that we can really see where the character is before we begin. He has an understanding of what it is to tell story through music as well as through the words and the actions, and isn't afraid to lean into it and lean into the wonder of what it is to actually make a musical. He knew that he wanted to do something that was reminiscent of an old school musical, of a big technicolor story, uh, on with music in it, of the stories of old, and he really went with that, and he was so, I think, I really think that it's such a brave thing to attempt to do, and I'm so glad that this is happening, not just for us but for him too, because I think he has a deep love for it. It isn't just a point to prove. It isn't just a thing to do. I think it really is a passion of his. Um, say, I think I know it is because of the way he talks about it, because of the tears I saw him cry on set. When he'd hear a song and he'd know that was right. When we got to the end of Defying Gravity, just the joy that would come from him when we finished The Wizard and I, the laughter that would come from him under the bed as he was shooting Popular. Like, he really loves it, and it's fun to watch him direct. It really is, because he sees all of the pictures, and he wants all of the details. I was laughed when he would always, his close-ups were really funny because he would come in to the face. So it wasn't like a camera, the lens wouldn't be over there catching the close-up. He would want the camera to be in close-up. So it would be this close to your face. And he loved to manage to get those shots because he knew that the truth is in people's eyes as well. So he would catch the action and then want to catch the truth. It's really wonderful watching him direct. Yeah.
Well, that way that you describe him, seizing the moment there, I think, aided, I'm sure, in enormous part by the fact that you were singing live
Yes.
on set,
Very
and
much.
and I really want to talk about that because I have experienced that. I was very fortunate to be on the set of Les Mis years ago,
Mhm.
and watch Samantha Barks perform live.
Yeah.
It adds a certain level of just you don't know what you've been missing when
Yeah,
you've been
yeah,
listening
yeah.
to pre-record, and there is to be found, I think, some B-roll of you on set singing, and it is extraordinary footage.
Thank you.
Tell me, just from a purely performance perspective, how
Yeah.
much knowing that it's being recorded live frees you to be able to make those kinds of choices in the moment.
It frees you completely. For me, it feels like I have complete freedom. You know what's going on, but you know that Dominic Addendum, Amendum, sorry, who's on piano, is listening for when you begin. So you know that there's someone breathing with you when you start. So if something happens in a scene, this is why I love I'm Not That Girl, because it really is free time. It doesn't really fall into rhythm for a second. It takes a while before that song hits a rhythm. Before then, it's like coloratura, free, almost rhythmless. There's no time. There's no real time signature. It sort of it starts when she feels ready to start. It's almost like the idea gets to fall in first before you begin. You get to watch the idea land, and then the song starts. And it's my favorite thing that he said, just silence first. You start. I want to hear you start first. When it feels right to begin, begin. Which is why that happened in that moment where it becomes hands touch, and the whisper was an accident. The whisper happened because that's what happened with my voice. It broke in that moment. And so when you're singing live, those those accidents that you would be able to fix if it was pre-record don't get fixed. So the word touch becomes a whisper because it's too hard to sing, because that's what the emotion does. So you get to feel the emotion. It's like a texture of that extra layered texture of, oh, there's emotion. Yeah, she actually feels that. And then she has to carry on. Sudden silence, sudden heat. You know, that 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 she has to really find the words. That's the beauty of having to sing live when you're doing something like this, that the words aren't just immediately available to you. You might know that song like the back of your hand, but when you're in situ, when you're when you're going through whatever emotion you're going through, you have to find the words again, because now they aren't just the song you're singing, they're the conversation you're having either with yourself or with another person. And for Elphaba, those conversations were often were solo. Those conversations are to herself. She has to admit to herself a thing that she's feeling. And so you're watching the most intimate moment with her, which I love being able to do. And then you get to watch her grow through that to get to Defying Gravity. And because I was in the wires, I had to find, well, how do I make the sound when I don't have ground underneath me? When I've got to make all of that, no, like I've got to make noise. I've got to make the volume of it, and the size of it has to expand. But usually to expand and make that sound, you need the ground beneath you to provide literally to provide gravity back at you. And if you don't have that, where does it go? Well, it would normally go in the diaphragm. How can you put it in your diaphragm if your diaphragm has a corset on it and a harness? Okay, so we have to find another place. So it's higher up in the ribs, it's higher up in the chest. But if it's in the chest, you don't want to catch breath because that's not going to give you enough stability. So then you have to send it into your back, and you have to sort of imagine that there's ground underneath you. So all of a sudden, there's you have a physical experience of what it is to fly and sing. So when you hear the last roar, that's the physical expression of what it is to sing. So it actually sounds like there's a rasp that comes out, there's a roar that comes out, because that's the only thing that can come out when you're doing it in the air and you have no ground beneath you. That's the sound.
That's fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, you literally anticipated my next question. It was going to be like, how do you do a live performance while you're on a rig like that,
Yeah.
and lift it up the air? So thank you for that. That's fantastic.
I will
There's
say
another
that
moment.
you
Yeah, yeah.
those things they're not possible unless you're trusted by a lot of people. So the stunts team, Joe, and Fizz and Ollie, and then my vocal coach Antea Bachet, they all work together. And then John's got to come in and be like, okay, so how many takes of this do we get? How many can we do this often? And I'm game to do it as many times as we need to do it, but it's also set up time for Joe and for the stunts team, and set up time for Alice to make sure that casting on first camera is also ready. And there's a lot that goes into making sure that the shot is gotten. When you're doing all that, everything has to line up. So the wire has to move at the right time. The brick has to move at the right time. The lights have to go at the right time. First camera has to go up at the right time. My notes have to be correct. Everything has to be set just so. But when it works, when it all comes together, it is the most satisfying thing ever, because that stuff should not work all at once, and then it does. It's thrilling, truly, truly thrilling. But yes, but learning what the body and the breath has to do in order to provide the sound is I'm glad I have that new skill.
Yeah. Well, there's another moment in this film that I really have to talk to you about, which is and it ties in, I think, to this relationship that now we're seeing you promote the movie together
Yeah.
with Ariana, is the Ozdust Ballroom Scene,
Mhm.
and the frailty, first of all, the frailty and the kind of the awkwardness, embarrassment, shame, that Elphaba feels in the
Mhm.
beginning, and then this fantastic expression that comes out.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me about shooting that scene because it feels like a very special moment on set.
Yeah. It was a special moment, and getting to that scene was really special actually because we we had choreography at the beginning. So Christopher Scott, uh, Will Loftus, and Comfort Fidoku, they had gone and created a piece of choreography already. And when I came in to learn the choreography, I watched it, and I said I like it, but it's not right because it wasn't it it didn't remind me of how Elphaba would move. So I said, I want to find out what her movement language is. What's the movement language that actually makes sense for her? She's the sharp edges in this piece. She's the angles, right? So and I think the piece they had made first had lots of rounds in it, lots of curves, and she's not that. She's sharp, angular. And I was like, what is the thing that looks like her, and how can we tell the story of a person who feels embarrassed but won't leave and is brave enough to take up the space on her own. And I also was like, and if she takes off the hat, why is she putting it back on? Why would she put that hat back on? She's done this dance, and that hat's got to, we've got to end with that hat back on her head. So a couple of things have to happen in this dance. She has to be really vulnerable and show the pain that she's experienced. She has to also, in a way, proclaim that she's okay being alone. She has to be brave enough to take up space. And I said, well, and what if this is the very first time that we're kind of seeing her do a bit of a spell? She's trying to imbue this hat with power because that hat then becomes the hat of the Wicked Witch. And it can't go back on her head the way it came off her head. So we then started creating a piece that felt like the piece that she would do as her, which is why the angles end up being like this. So we start with, right. And then, we end up with this over here, it's angles again. Like she ends up with this, it's sharp angles again. The cat angles straight forward before this happens. So you get that. And I remember this was like, and this has to be the end because that's the power. And then she picks up the hat and puts it on. So that in itself is a movement for her to proclaim what she needs to change the shape of this hat. And then she challenges Glinda. Then she drops into the room and says, can you join me? Can we change this? My feelings are hurt, you know? And what Ari did, which I love so much, because it's also a really brave thing to do, is not completely learn the dance she didn't take a look at the dance at all until I brought it to her. So we'd been away siloed learning this dance. And then one day we were ready. And then when she saw it for the first time, she had never seen it. And so we did a bit of exercise where when she came in, she just did a couple of the things that she remembered from the dance. So she steps out. And when she does the hand on the head, those are things she just noticed. And then there's that wonderful moment, and I kept thinking, how do I tell her I'll help you? So it's just the look of come, you can join, I can teach you. And she learns it. The first time we did it, she learned it from me, like mirroring it, like a mirror exercise. We learned it together. I taught her it, which is why it moves slowly, because I am teaching her the dance. And what she tried to do was never completely learn it, so that whenever we did it, she was learning it again, almost for the first time. And that whole section is, I think, in total ended up being, when we shot it, was like 20 minutes, just us doing that over and over again. And each time we would get to this, the tear would fall. I would cry. It wasn't forced, it just happened, because you're using all of the memories that you've had of feeling alone, feeling rejected, feeling bullied, feeling like you're not acceptable, feeling like you don't belong, feeling embarrassed, feeling all of those painful things, because you can't provide that emotion if it's not coming from a real place. So it has to come from a real place to share it. The wonderful thing about that day is that every single person in that room was so aware of what was necessary to do that, that I felt really safe in that room. I felt like there was a wall of energy from every person in that room around me. You could hear a pin drop. When we weren't shooting, when the laughter wasn't happening, it was just quiet. People were so kind that day. And I think people don't realize, when you watch those scenes, that they always come out the best when the person feels the safest. Because you can't do something like that because you have to feel safe enough to be that open. And that's what that day was like. By the end of the day, she sent me home. She said, "You have to go now. You have to leave. You have to go home.
Yeah.
It's time to go." Because we spent a whole day doing that, and it's a lot to put on the floor. And I remember she came outside first. She was always the first to find me. and then followed by John and Mark Platt, and they all sent me home at the end of that day. Yeah.
It's a really beautiful moment in a beautiful movie. Cynthia, I feel like we could talk all night about this, but how
We
about
really
instead of
could,
that,
yeah.
we meet again next year to do this again?
Yeah,
That
I'd
would be
love to.
lovely.
Yeah, I'd
Thank
love
you
to.
so much,
Thank
and
you.
take
Thank
care.
you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.